Too young, too old, or just right. The data behind marriage age gaps. When people debate the ideal age gap between a man and a woman in marriage, they often start with personal preference. A man should be older, age is just a number, women mature faster, or large gaps are dangerous. But the data suggests a more careful answer. The best supported conclusion is not that one exact number is perfect. The stronger conclusion is that smaller spousal age gaps are more common today and are generally associated with fewer life stage mismatches, whereas larger age gaps may increase complexity and divorce risk, marital satisfaction, fertility timing, power balance, health, caregiving, and widowhood. In other words, the age gap is not destiny, but it is not irrelevant either. What is the normal age gap in modern marriage? A good place to start is with population data. In the United States, husbands and wives have become much closer in age over time. Pew Research Center, using U.S. Census Bureau data, reported that the average age gap between husbands and wives was 2.2 years in 2022, down from 2.4 years in 2000 and 4.9 years in 1880. That tells us something important. In modern American marriages, the typical age gap is not 10, 15, or 20 years. The average is closer to 2 years. Globally, women are still generally younger than their male partners, but Pew notes that this pattern contributes to older women being more likely to live alone later in life. Across the world, about 20% of women ages 60 and older live alone, compared with 11% of men. So the first data-supported point is, in modern U.S. marriages, husbands and wives are usually close in age, with an average gap of about 2 years. The reasonable assumption is, smaller gaps may reflect modern changes in education, workplace participation, dating patterns, and expectations of companionate marriage. The careful conclusion is, if we define optimal partly by what is socially common and structurally easier to sustain, the strongest demographic evidence points toward a small gap, not a large one. Age at first marriage matters before age gap even enters the discussion. Before debating the ideal gap, we should ask, how old are the people getting married? This matters because a 5-year gap does not mean the same thing at every age. A 35-year-old man marrying a 30-year-old woman is very different from a 23-year-old man marrying an 18-year-old woman. Same gap, different life stage. The U.S. Census Bureau reported that in 2025, the estimated median age at first marriage was 30.8 for men and 28.4 for women, up from 23.5 for men and 21.1 for women in 1975. This means modern first marriages are happening much later than they did a few generations ago. That matters because age gap risk is partly about maturity, independence, and life stage readiness. A small gap among teenagers or very young adults can still involve immaturity and instability. A larger gap among fully established adults may be less concerning than the same gap involving a very young partner. So, one data-supported point is, Americans are marrying later than in previous generations, and the modern male-female first marriage age difference is roughly 2 to 3 years. A careful assumption is that later marriage may reduce some risks associated with immaturity, financial instability, and poor partner selection. A careful conclusion is that the debate should not ask only, what age gap is best? It should ask, what age gap is best at what ages? A 5-year gap involving 2 mature adults is not equivalent to a 5-year gap involving someone barely into adulthood. What does the data say about age gap and marital satisfaction? One of the strongest peer-reviewed studies on this topic is the Australian study, The Marital Satisfaction of Differently Aged Couples. It used household panel data from Australia to examine how spousal age gaps affect marital satisfaction over time. The study found that couples with larger age gaps may report higher satisfaction early on, but over time, marital satisfaction tends to decline more sharply among age gap couples compared with couples closer in age. The decline becomes especially noticeable several years into marriage. A summary of the study noted that people married to much older or younger spouses tend to experience larger declines in marital satisfaction over time, particularly after about 6 to 10 years of marriage. This is important because it challenges the honeymoon effect. A large age gap relationship may feel exciting, romantic, or beneficial in the beginning. The older partner may bring stability. The younger partner may bring energy, admiration, or fertility. But after several years, the differences in life stage, values, money, parenting, health, and social expectations may become more visible. So, the data-supported point is that larger age gaps are associated in some longitudinal research with sharper declines in marital satisfaction over time. The assumption is that part of the decline may come from life stage mismatch, economic shocks, social disapproval, differences in energy, fertility timing, parenting stage, and expectations about gender roles. The careful conclusion is that smaller gaps are not automatically happier, but they may reduce one major source of long-term mismatch, being in different seasons of life. What does the data say about the age gap and divorce risk? Divorce data is more complicated because different studies use different populations and methods. But the broad pattern is that larger age differences are often associated with higher divorce risk. A Canadian study analyzed the probability of divorce based on age differences between husbands and wives using census, survey, and divorce data. Another frequently cited U.S. study by Francis Tan and Mialan used survey data from more than 3,000 ever-married persons in the United States. The paper is best known for its study of wedding spending and marriage duration, but public discussions often cite its age gap findings as well. You will often hear claims like, a 5-year gap raises divorce risk, a 10-year gap raises it more, and a 20-year gap raises it even more. However, for a podcast, I would be careful with those exact numbers. They are widely repeated, but the underlying study was not primarily designed as a definitive age gap study. It was a survey-based study about wedding expenses and marital duration, and age gap was one of several variables. So the responsible way to say it is, several studies and data analysis associate larger age gaps with higher marital instability or lower satisfaction, but the size of the effect varies by study. The age gap may be acting as a proxy for other issues, different life stages, prior marriages, economic inequality, family disapproval, unequal power, fertility pressure, or cultural mismatch. The safest evidence-based position is that larger age gaps are associated with higher marital complexity and sometimes higher divorce risk, but the data does not prove that age gap alone causes divorce. This is important because correlation is not causation. A 15-year gap may correlate with divorce, not because the number 15 is magical, but because large gap marriages are more likely to include complicating factors: previous children, remarriage, wealth imbalance, family conflict, health differences, or different expectations about children. The same life stage hypothesis. A major assumption behind the age gap debate is what I would call the same life stage hypothesis. The hypothesis is simple. Couples closer in age are more likely to share similar life experiences, cultural references, friendship circles, career stages, fertility timing, energy levels, and retirement timelines. This is not always true, but it is often true enough to matter. A man who is 31 and a woman who is 29 may both be thinking about career growth, homeownership, children, and financial planning. A man who is 52 and a woman who is 29 may be thinking about very different things. He may be thinking about retirement, legacy, adult children, and health maintenance. She may be thinking about career acceleration, childbirth, travel, and identity formation. The data on average age gaps supports this indirectly. Modern marriages are trending towards smaller gaps, and the average U.S. husband-wife gap is about 2.2 years. So, the evidence does not prove that same life stage couples always succeed, but it supports the idea that small gaps are more common and likely easier to align. The age gap is not just about attraction. It is about whether two people are trying to build the same life at the same time. Fertility and reproductive timing. This is one of the most important biological factors. If the couple wants biological children, age gap must be discussed alongside the ages of both partners. ACOT states that a woman's peak reproductive years are the late teens through the late 20s. Fertility begins to decline around age 30, declines faster in the mid-30s, and by age 45, natural pregnancy is unlikely for most women. This does not mean women cannot have children in their late 30s or 40s. Many do, but the probability and medical risks change. ACOG also notes that pregnancy at age 35 or older is associated with increased risks, including higher rates of certain complications, and that twinning rates are higher among women in their 30s and 40s compared with women younger than 20. Male age also matters. It is often assumed that only the woman's age matters, but research on advanced paternal age